This documentary traces the tools, materials, and spirit of Blackfeet crafts, made with members of the Blackfeet Grafts Association, scholars and others respected for the understanding of Blackfeet tradition. This oral documentary gives a glimpse of the wealth of knowledge, skill, and spirit of contemporary Blackfeet artists and their ancestors. Dr. John Ewers, anthropologist with the Smithsonian Institution, introduces hide tanning, described by Irene Goodstrike, a Blackfeet artist, and Eddie Barbeau, Chippewa artist and authority on Indian crafts. A description of Blackfeet clothing, beading, and decoration follows, with Eddie Barbeau, Louise Evans, a Blackfeet artist, and Dr. John Ewers, and Mabel Littlebull demonstrates the construction of a beaded pipe bag or tobacco bag.
The Blackfeet were not only very vital, aggressive warriors, but they also were very competent craftsmen. And one of the interesting things that I've noticed over the years in studying Plains Indians is that was not only true of the Blackfeet, but it was also true of the Sioux. Some of the most successful and the most able warring tribes were also tribes who devoted considerable amount of their attention to arts and crafts. We have to consider what our sources of information about the history of Blackfeet crafts are. Actually, we don't have very much in the way of even any written descriptions prior to the very last years of the 18th century. The accounts that we have for the period around 1800 seem to indicate that the Blackfeet were making majority of items of clothing from hides, and it would appear that for the finer garments, they used the smaller, thinner hides. I think there's considerable indication. Antelope skins were much preferred for fine leggings and sometimes shirts as well. By and large, the clothing that went next to the skin was made of smaller hides than buffalo. Buffalo was used, of course, for robes in winter, and it was used for some winter garments, but not for warmer weather clothing.
I learned to tan through my mother and an old lady. The way she taught my mother, my aunt and I, we first take our hide, either deer, elk, or bear, whichever, but our Indians very seldom used to tan bear because that was kind of a medicine or a great power of the Indians. So we'd soak our hide in water, and we'd use ashes from the poplar tree or quaking asp, which give off a clean ash, and that contains enough lye in it to help the hair slip from the hide. Then after the hair starts slipping, you test it by pulling it. Well, then you drape it over a smooth pole, and you take your old-time scraper, which she always used a gray, big old Hudson Bay butcher knife, or else she used a sharp flint rock. I still have part of a flint stone. Well, I use that because it holds an edge, and she'd scrape this hair off it would give. Black tissue under the hair, you got to get rid of that, or you have a smooth surface and it's hard to sew. Your buckskin ain't just soft and pliable to run a needle through. You have trouble working with it.
The method of tanning, the Indian tanning, that is to carefully flesh the hide, and skinning, be careful not to scar it with a knife inside, but rather pull it and release the tissue. After it's removed from the animal, it's stretched out as far as it could. Ideally, to flesh it immediately after with a fleshing tool. Originally, they used an elk bone serrated in a squarish end and about 10 inches long, wrapped with buckskin with a hand loop around it, and the fleshing is done toward you from the median line. That's the center of the animal, and out toward the sides of the hide until all the enduring flesh and tissue is carefully removed. Then it's sized by staking it out and pegging it down and letting it sun cure. And then it's turned over and washed and cleansed, and it's put into lukewarm water. Sometimes a little wood ashes are added to slip the hair, and it's left in there in a favorable temperature around 70. The hair will slip in 2 or 3 days. Then it's taken off with the heel of the hand. After the dermal tissue is removed, that's the tissue just under the hair. It's generally hung, and with a blade of a knife, it's stripped off. This distinguishes buckskin from commercial hide because it's suede on both sides. That is rough. And then it's put in a preparation of animal fats and brains, and sometimes the liver is used. It's mixed up and brought to a boil and allowed to cool, and then mixed together. Some Indians use the grease first and then apply the brains. The hide is greased and rolled up, and then it's removed and washed off, then put on a pole stretcher. It's looped in and laced in. Then a wooden blade about 4 inches wide and about 3 foot long is used to break the tissue, and it's worked against the hide. The hide gives because of the stretcher. They don't tear the hide. It's worked till it's quite dry. And then it's removed from the stretcher and what we call pulled. The old people used to use a sinew rope or rawhide in a loop on the inside of a teepee pole because of the slanting position. They could sit down and with the right and left hand pull it briskly over this rope until it's completely dry. And it comes out just as soft and nice as can be and white. Then it's taken off and pulled again to restore its original size. And then if it's desirable to smoke it for some things like moccasins or clothes that aren't strictly ceremonial, it's made into a tube-like envelope with the bottom end open, and you use a real smudge. It's punk and willow or corn cobs. A lot of the tribes raise corn. They bartered it. They use different woods and punk to produce different colors, deep chocolate or a light golden brown. Willow was probably the best, willow or corn cobs. The smoke pot is the depression in the earth with their fire at the bottom, allowing the smoke to enter the envelope. The hide is still white on the outside and the desired color on the inside, so the envelope is reversed and pegged down and hung over the smoke pot again to smoke both sides the same color. Then it's removed and wrapped and stored away for a few days to set the color, and that completes the brain tanning process. The Blackfoot patterns were identifiable in their form and treatment. The hides were beaded with shell, seeds, hair, dyed, and appliqued in a decorative form. In the earlier times, before they had threads, they used dyed moose mane, and they used porcupine quills. They were flattened and dyed and quilled in patterns. And later, the traders introduced the variety of beads in all colors and shapes, from the crow beads to the sea beads, the pony beads and bugle beads, and so on. And also they used small animals such as birds, dried and treated to decorate their garments, strips of fur, ermine, wolf, foxtails, and the like.
Well, in the olden days, they didn't have the cloth, so they wore buckskin all the time. They had a dress that they wore for every day, for work and all of that. Then they had some very nice dresses that they used for special occasions, such as their powwows or their ceremonial doings. Well, they keep the best for those celebrations. To put these dresses together, to make them look nice, well, you have to take your time and stitch very fine. And it requires a special needle to stitch this buckskin with. We have to use a 3-point Glover's needle, and we call it buckskin needles. And that's a needle that works very good on buckskin, especially if you have 3 thicknesses of it, where you go to put your waist and your skirt together and your fringe. You're sewing through 3 thicknesses of buckskin in the front and the back part of the waist and the skirt. You overcast your seam. You have to make your stitches small in order to make your seams look very neat and nice. If the hide is good size, well, you won't have to piece that so many places. They use 1 hide for the back and 1 hide for the front, and they trim across the shoulders, and then they sew the back and the front together, and they leave an opening for the neckline here. Then they sew from the neck on through your shoulder part to the length of your sleeve, and that's all overcast stitching. And under the sleeve, under your arm, they get thongs and they string them through and tie it together. Then the rest of the way, they stitch down the skirt line till they get to the bottom. Then you start beading. You start from the center of the chest part out toward the right or toward the left. You don't mark your designs. You just kind of pinpoint them with an awl or something to show how far your design's going to go. And most of the designs that they used was the rows of beads. Some have 3 rows, and then elk teeth in between the rows to make them richer looking. Then you have these fringes that you cut along the waistline that you had put in earlier. You can either string some more larger beads to match the beading on your dress, and some just prefer the straight fringe.
But it was on the northern plains, for example, where in the early days there was a great deal of decoration of clothing and some other articles with porcupine quills. The Sioux and the Blackfeet, who were quill workers in the early days, did some excellent quill work, became, I think, the leading bead workers of the plains in the later time, although the type of stitch that was used, the designs that were employed were quite different. And also there was a considerable exchange in the late years of the 19th century. The Assiniboine actually exchanged quite a number of fine suits and things of that kind to the Blackfeet in exchange for horses and other things. And some of the designs that appear in Blackfeet shirts of the early years of the 20th century are designs that quite probably are Assiniboine origin. The one I can think of particular, which the Assiniboine speak of, is a feather design. It's kind of 2 triangles with a common base, whereas the design the Indians often spoke of as a mountain design, which is stepped triangles going up and coming down the other side. That appears to be very old Blackfoot design.
It's a custom wherever they have Indian ceremonies. Whoever invited the people to come will pack his tobacco pouch and his tobacco and the pipe stem so that they can use it to smoke with. It's just a custom, and it's especially used for the medicine ceremonials. They can carry their tobacco and their kinnikinnick and their pipe bowl and the stem. And the reason they're made long like that is to have the stem fit in there.
This is Indian tan buckskin. I cut it out and I fold it to get the center. You always start from the center when you bead. Then I fill this one whole side first, and I'll go into the other side. It's the same pattern. I stick my beading needle through the buckskin, and I pull it out. Then I mark my buckskin. My center line for the marking is all, the tips of it is red, and the rest is green. And on each side I have 3 rolls of green. And then on each side I put 2 solid red on it. Then I start in with my design. And I'm using nylon thread. And there's 2 needles to this. One I thread and the other one to tack. I tack my beads with the buckskin needle, and I always stick it towards the right of the beads, and I go over the beads and I tack with every other 2 beads. Well, the best needle to use bead with is number 11, and to tack with is a buckskin needle in size 7. This buckskin needle is 3-pointed. Well, I thread 1, pull it out through the buckskin, and as I pull it out and I string my beads on there, then with this buckskin needle I tack down with. Then after I get these 3 solid colors in, and I start in with my designs, and I'm very careful. I have to spot pick my beads. Spot picking is the beads got to be all same size. A lot of them I couldn't use. I'd just have to let them go. I have to line this after I get through with it. Then I put it together. After I sew it together, then I overcast it with beads. They call it twisted design. I put it together and I put my fringes on. And there's different kind of designs. This is for the Blackfeet Indians. They call it mountain designs.
Animal hides played a predominant role in the material culture of Blackfeet Indians. Various processes and techniques were used to preserve and tan hides. The article's function determines the choice of material. Smoke hides are used for clothing, moccasins, and berry bags because they are durable and less susceptible to insects. Smoke-tanned hides and rawhide for soling are used in moccasins. Moccasin making is demonstrated by Louise Evans, Blackfeet artist and granddaughter of Chewing Blackbone.
Well, there are 8 pieces to a pair of moccasins. You cut the tops first, and you cut 2 of them. You turn your pattern on to the right first, and you mark your pattern. Then you turn that piece over like this. Same way with your soling. You put your sole down, and you mark that out. And when you finish one side, you turn it plumb over and mark on the other side to make sure that you have soles for each foot. Well, then we go ahead and figure out what pattern we're going to use. And you don't mark our designs in our style. We have the geometric designs on some and the stripes on some. And then we have the crooked nose design, such as I'm making now. We have the buffalo head design and the teepee design with the man standing in the doorway. When you're getting ready to bead them, then you take and measure it half from toe to heel and fold it in half. You start your design in the very middle. Then you start beading from the center. Then you work from side to side. And you match your designs on both sides and count your beads. And if you count it just right, well, they come out even on both sides. And then you measure and cut your tops of your moccasins from toe to heel exactly half. Well, the back half is for your instep and to your heel. And from the instep to your toe is the same distance as it is from the back. Then you cut this part of your moccasin, the cross cut here below your beading, maybe a couple inches. And you open that up as far as that cut. Then you take the heel and you take a piece of material and you put your third piece in there and welt seam it on the wrong side. The welt is to preserve the stitching and to make a nice appearance, a nice finish to your moccasin when it's complete. Then you turn it over, then your welt seaming is out. Then you take scissors and you cut your welting even with the buckskin to make a nice finish, smooth finish. When you start to sew them, you always have 3 pieces to stitch each time. You have your sole, then you have your welting, and then your moccasin top. Your top of your moccasin leather is larger than the sole, so therefore you have to tack your soling, your welting, and the top of your moccasin in 4 places: at the toe, on each side, left and right, and then at the heel, and make sure that your leather fits in good. Gradually ease your top in to make it fit the sole, and that gives it a fullness at the top. You have to take this curve and fit it in. You don't gather it, you don't pleat it like you would material. You put your welt seam in like you finish the heel, while you put your welt seam in your soling. You stick your needle in kind of sideways, and you take half of the leather on the soling, and you leave half of it without stitching through it. I slanted a little. You take half of the outside sole, catch that half and leave that half raw edge out. And that's to give it plenty of protection to the thread. Otherwise, in a little while you'll run on your moccasins while your thread is wore out, and then they'll start ripping. And then you go back to cut your tongue out of the same material, and you cut a little strip, 1/4 of an inch strip, to use as your welting. And you put this little strip next to the moccasin, and you hold the 3 pieces, and then you sew them. And when you get through, you pull that tongue up. Then you put your finger under it and kind of push the little piece that you put in there. Then you cut a strip about 1 inch wide. You sew it onto the moccasin. See where it's stitched right here? That's the cuff. You can either leave it square pointed or you can cut it round like this. This cuff is straight. It's cut just straight, and it's raw, and it's stitched from under here. In the old days, they didn't have the buckskin needle, and they didn't have the nylon thread and wax that we have now. Our old people used a bone awl, and they had sinew. It's a muscle of an animal. And they twist the sinew to a thin size of thread and comes to a sharp point. And when you punch the buckskin with your bone awl, while you take that sinew, it works just like a needle. This little trimming, they left that as a symbol that you never walk a crooked step. What do they call mochtokis? If you keep that on, well, you always walk straight and don't get into any mischief or anything. They did a lot of other things. They made buckskin berry bags, and they made parfleshes to carry their supplies.
Most Blackfeet storage bags were made from rawhide and parflesh, hard tanned leathers. A Blackfeet elk hoofberry bag is constructed and described by Eddie Barbeau.
Well, the old Indian people used to make bags of elk and buffalo and other ordinarily discarded pieces of hide. Principally, they made them out of the legs of these large animals. They were used for storing pemmican and for gathering berries. And they were in box-like shape or made in a basket form. These elk bags are made of 4 pieces that are taken from the elk knee joint in the hock to about 3 inches below the dew claws to the top of the hoof. When the hoof is removed, the dew claws are peeled out as far as you can with that extra bone, and they're prepared by scraping and removing the excess tissue and vessels from the top side. To set the hair and to preserve them from insects and moths, we use a solution of sulfuric acid and salt and water. A pound of salt to a quart of water is brought to a boil and mix a saturated solution. It's allowed to cool, and the ounce of acid is put in, and the hides are put in to take up this tanning process. Then they're taken out and washed with borax, purified, and stretched on a board. Ordinarily, the old people didn't tan the forelegs, they just dressed them well, and they became rawhide or parflesh, but they're not broken or worked. They're tacked flat to preserve their contour. They dry quite flat and hard. Then they're taken and shaped into bags or baskets. They were pieced together with a rawhide bottom in a round shape for a basket and sinew sewn in the length of the four legs. It has to be in a parfleche condition. That's partially tanned, then it had to be stiff. Could only be obtained by soaking and filling with sand and allowed to dry in the desired shape. Some materials for boxes and cases and saddles are parfleche. The hide is stretched and dried and washed. The tissue is broken. The slick is removed as in tanning. It's pigged out and dried in a big sheet, and then it's cut in the pattern desired, such as a bag to hold herbs or a parfleche suitcase to pack their clothing for transporting, or strips of rawhide to bind. This rawhide is applied wet to hold things together, to make drum heads or other desired hard end products.
Elk, rawhide, and deerhide thongs are used by Mike Lazyboy in the construction of a drum, which Mike Lazyboy then plays with his wife, Ida Oscar.
This drum, making old people, that's what we learn it. Now I'm showing these drums to young people to learn, and you can do it anytime you feel like. Try it. I learned this for my father, Lazyboy. He makes drums. He gets birds. Just to one whole board, a little thin one. They just bend all around. You got to wet the wood for 2-3 days, and you can't nail them things around. You have to tie it for 2 days to dry. How do you make it round? The sprays got to be each side. If you don't go one side, they go crooked, see. Deer hide, you can't make drum on. Elk hide, that's the best way. You can't use hide on the dry. You got to be soaked. You never make drum dry. Got to be rawhide. Elk hide, it is strong and it never breaks when you tie it round. And after you get through, you tie the cross. Both sides, you punch a hole in here and put the strings on, you tie it center. And a certain way to make these things go tight, you have to tie them for the hide. If it's loose, you have to take it out and string them yourself. When you try, you have to paint. These real drums, you don't hardly put any animal on, just a plain. I have real Indian paint, come from dirt, just like ground, and you see, maybe a red one, maybe like a yellow one, black ones. And I use fat, my hands, that grease dries, same thing, the hide. You can use that drum I made, anything you want to use out of it. If you want to sing for yourself, and the fellas going to have a crazy dog and this grass dance, you don't be stingy for that. You give out all these things.